Good morning, Stephen. It's lovely to have you with us today. You're going to be one of the expert tutors for the course. So we wanted to hear a bit more about your personal advocacy experiences. So what are you going to be telling us about today?
Okay, well, I want to kind of tell you a story, a little bit about an experience that we had in Kenya, where we worked with the government of Kenya to put in place a national old age pension for everybody over 70. So I'll go a little bit into the background of it and then kind of discuss and describe what we did in a bit more detail. There's a sort of fundamental point, right, that we have to understand when we're doing any advocacy for social protection, when we're trying to get programs in place, is that, you know, poverty targeted programs are not very popular. That's why we see a lot of poverty targeted programs across Africa. They never get scaled up. Governments aren't interested in them. There's no real reward in it for governments, not just across Africa, right? This is a similar thing globally in high income countries. However, universal programs are very popular, right? Because everybody's getting it on a basis. So I think that's a kind of fundamental point that we have to understand in our advocacy. We're going to be way more successful if we're actually putting forward something that governments themselves actually, and politicians and policymakers really actually feel as though they can also gain some electoral rewards while also making a great difference to their country, right? Let's not be too cynical, right? There's many politicians out there who really want to make a difference. So this story goes back to work that we were doing with UNICEF WFP in Kenya's development pathways. There was a range of pieces of work that we did. One was a big sector review of the Kenyan social protection system. It's a big, long document that we put together that's available. This is around 2016, 2017. We also began to do work on what they call national investment plan, which was a sort of vision for the future in Kenya, and a few other pieces of work, including putting together some training. Now, at the time, all the work we were doing was with civil servants, right? Who were great, right? The civil servants, they really bought into it. They wanted to move things forward. But civil servants are civil servants, right? They're not decision makers, right? It's the politicians in a democratic context that make the decisions. And a big mistake we make in our advocacy is we talk to civil servants. No matter how senior they are, they're civil servants, right? They're servants. They're not the decision makers. And I think in the work with WFP and the ILO and then WFP and UNICEF, that I think there was a gradual realization. Yeah, we weren't talking to the right people. We needed to get to talk to ministers in that. And I think we had an idea. Okay, why don't we do some training for ministers and MPs? Okay, and bring, because that's where the decisions are made, and that's where we're getting the political parties. And there was an election coming up in Kenya on the horizon. So we thought, great, let's start giving them an understanding of social protection. Then we can enter into a dialogue. So we set up a training session in Mombasa. A number of ministers came down, mainly from the sort of ministries of the equivalent of social protection, social development. Not so many MPs came down. I mean, Kenyan MPs are the most highly paid MPs in the world, and didn't deign to come too many of them. But we got a small but very enthusiastic group that came along, and so we gave them a basic sort of training on really the on the benefits of investing in social protection, different approaches, etc. And it was great. See, the ministers there was three of them there, and they were getting more and more interested. And then one of the ministers, the senior minister in the cabinet, we were talking about this idea about the popularity of different types of schemes. He said, she said to me, I don't understand. I didn't understand one thing. Kenya at the time had a poverty targeted old age pension. The older person's cash transfer, it was going about 20% of older people. And she said, I didn't understand. We went to I went to a village, where the old age pension was there, and I expected everybody to be really happy to see me, right? Because we'd given them this old age pension. And she said, we went in and everybody was angry. They came around and said, why did you give it to this person and not to that person? These people are the poorest older people in the community. You've left them, you've abandoned them. We don't understand how you've selected people. It's just random. And so they got all really upset with me, and I couldn't understand it because we've been trying to do a good thing to help the poorest older people in Kenya. And I said to her, okay, I said, what I don't understand is, why do politicians go around and deliberately design programs that make you unpopular, right? Because we know historically poverty targeted programs make you unpopular. Why do you put in place programs that make you unpopular? You're a politician. Don't you want to be popular? And yeah, you could see, I said, based on the train, I said, but if you'd given everybody in that village an old age pension, how do you think they would have reacted? And then you could see the penny drop. Oh, yeah. You can see, yeah, if everybody got it, there would have been no complaints. Everybody would have been happy. Yep, said, that's it, got it now. And so, I think that was a key moment in the training. Now, her junior minister, who was very bright and very sharp and very dynamic, and it was fantastic working with her, and she really got it, right? And she saw the links with the election coming up, and she talked to me and said, look, I think we've got an opportunity here. Can you help me? I want to put something up to the cabinet secretary, that's the main minister in Kenya for finance, for the treasury. He said, I want to put up something there, and I want to get up to the cabinet secretary and up to the president with this. So I put together a short 2-page note for do it, where we talked about the economic benefits of investing in the pension because it was going to the treasury, the low cost of it, but also in the election, this would be an electoral winner, right, for them. So we did that, and then she said, she went off and talked, and then she came back and said, oh, could you put together a paper on how investing in universal pensions has helped win elections? So I said, yeah, I can put together a paper on that. So I put together a small paper with lots of different stories about how investing in universal old age pensions have been used and had helped win elections. There's quite a few examples for that. She sent that off to the cabinet secretary and presumably to the president. I actually found, somebody told me from the ILO that that paper ended up in Malawi at some point, and just before the president there started asking for a universal old age pension, although the donors didn't listen to him. They just continued to do the poverty targeted one. But that's an aside to the story. And it all went quiet for about a couple of months. Then we're back in Kenya, and then suddenly she said, right, we've got a meeting with the cabinet secretary for finance, right? This is the big meeting, right? This is like probably the second most powerful person in Kenya at the time. So we went in, prepared a nice PowerPoint, went in, we had a 45-minute meeting, he asked the normal cynical questions that you would expect from a minister of finance. Can we afford this and all of this and all of that? But yeah, hope we answered them in a positive way. We had the numbers together, we had the evidence, we had everything. We'd done loads of research, so it was grounded in really, really strong research. And we stressed again, you've got an election coming up, you'll win the election if you put this forward. Went off, all went quiet. 3 or 4 months later, in the Kenyan parliament, cabinet secretary stood up, and this was about 4 or 5 months before the election, stood up in parliament and astounded everybody, announced that Kenya was going to put in place a universal old age pension, right? And it came into the budget speech. So we're going to do this, put aside the budget, and we're going to do it. And they did. In the end, they used this, and in the election itself, that's when they registered people. Right, they did it during the election. They registered older people during the election. Ministers went out, senior politicians went out to all the registration areas. I mean, I don't know, whether we want to say that you should do that, but that's what was was done. It was used as a really important tool in the electoral campaign. I think what they wanted to do was to prove that this wasn't just a promise, right? Prove it wasn't a promise by actually registering everybody. And they managed in a very short period of time, 5-6 weeks, to register around 80% of over 70s in Kenya, which was pretty impressive given the speed at which it was rolled out. They then won the election. I think they certainly believed that it won them. I heard the vice president speak a couple of years later and talk about the importance of the universal pension. When he was asked why they introduced it, he talked about, well, clearly we did this because we understood that targeting the poorest older people wasn't fair to everybody. It was wrong, and it wasn't working. So, I think it's an interesting story, but it's actually something that you can take years. We did a similar piece of work in Uganda. It took 10 or 12 years. There wasn't the same demands to win an election, and it was a much more challenging piece of work. Whereas in Kenya, the election. And let's remember, this is not just about Africa. This is what happened after the Second World War in Europe. That's why Social Democrats won power right across many parts of Europe, because they were promising universal benefits, health, education, and social protection.
Thank you, Stephen. That's a very, very powerful story. It was very interesting to see how you managed to leverage the political will using the elections in that case as a hook, and of course working to a fairly tight time frame in that case, which, as you said, of course, isn't always the case, because advocacy does take long in other instances. But what would you say your lessons from that particular experience were?
Well, I think some of the lessons is that we had as I said, a strong evidence base. We'd actually done a lot of work. We calculated, we had the numbers, we had all of the information to answer all of the questions that these high-level politicians do. We weren't just going in throwing things out. We'd done months and months of in-depth work, so we had something really solid. We answered the questions that the politicians were wanting to have answered in part. And I think, as you said, this I think it was just explaining to them. It was all counterintuitive to what they thought. They necessarily, as many people do, believed that to help the poor was to give these poverty-targeted benefits. When the penny dropped, that actually that was wrong, then I think they could shift from one paradigm of thinking to another, and then they realized, and I think third lesson, wasn't just civil servants. We got to speak to the decision makers. That was key, and fourth was the time at which we did it, working hard just before the election, because I think historically, that's when most investment in social protection happens, whether it's high income or low income countries or middle income countries. When we really get big changes in spending and commitment from progressive politicians, it comes in during elections, because that's when the politicians are having their discussion with the citizens of a country. Oh, and I think the final point is, we know that the World Bank would not have been very happy about this, and the government of Kenya knew that the World Bank wouldn't have been very happy about this and would have put pressure on them. What the government of Kenya actually did was they didn't tell the World Bank anything about what they were doing on this. It was completely silent. And afterwards, the World Bank complained, "Well, you didn't tell us about this." Well, yeah, we didn't tell you because you'd have put pressure on us. We just kept this quiet. We did it as a national initiative, and this turned into the Kenya's flagship program. Way more investment than in any of the programs that have been pushed by donors up to them.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. I like the anecdote about neutralizing potential opposition just by not saying anything. So thank you so much, for sharing this this really, really interesting experience, which covers a lot of the points that we're covering in the course, and so is very, very relevant to our fellow advocates on social protection in Kenya and in many other countries. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your input.
Right, great. Thanks very much. Bye.